Thank you.
Hello and welcome. I have looked forward to this so much, and I'm also a little bit nervous because I'm interviewing, I'm a big fan of yours.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a big fan of the Ruth Galloway novels, and I know you probably don't need any introduction here, but I'm going to do it anyway, just in case there's someone who has never met Elly Griffiths. So you are the author of 15 novels that are now out in Danish, set in Norfolk, about the forensic archaeologist Ruth Galloway. But you also have actually not just 2, but you have 3 other series for adults. And The Frozen People is the first book in the 3rd series.
Yes.
And I know you've talked about that elsewhere here at the festival. So, and you've also written books for children, and you've written books in your own name, Domenica de Rosa. And I'm going to introduce you, Rebecca. You've worked with Elly for a long time, and you now have your own literary agency. And we thought it would be quite interesting just to hear, how many other people are involved in producing a series than. Just turning the microphone on, than the author themselves. So the headline today is The End of Ruth Galloway, but I'm going to add a question mark. So I'm going to say, the end of Ruth Galloway? Really?
It is the end of Ruth Galloway for now.
So that's just...
So, thank you. So I'm pretty, can I ask who has read book 15? Who's read all... Oh, that's amazing. Isn't that amazing?
That is incredible.
Oh, wow. Well, anyhow, if you have read all 15 books, I think you'll understand that Ruth and Nelson need some privacy. So they need some time on their own. They're on a break, as they said in Friends, but I'm sure I will go back to them.
You're sure?
What do I think, Rebecca?
You heard it here first.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that in one way or another, I'll go back to them.
All right. So it might not necessarily be the end, but we hope not. So just for those, I think there were a couple of people who hadn't read number 15. So could you just tell us a little bit about Die jordiske rester, or The Last Remains?
Yes, of course. I spent the whole weekend learning to say Iskotspor. And as you see, I still can't say it, so I'm not even going to try that one. So, yes, so this book starts with Ruth. Ruth has a lot of decisions to make in this book, really. Her job is under threat, her job at the university. Sadly, the case with lots of archaeology departments in Britain is under threat. It might be shut. Also, she is involved with a case. A girl's body is found buried in the wall of a cafe. And the investigations into this show that the girl was a student at Cambridge University where Ruth taught, but also that she was a friend of her friend Cathbad's. So that's quite close to home. And the third decision Ruth has to make is about her relationship with DCI Harry Nelson, which starts in the first book, Pin under jorden. Yes. It's only taken me 15 years to learn that, and I still haven't learned it. Crossing places in England, yes. So their relationship starts in that book, and by book 15, it's very complicated. So that's where Ruth is in this book.
Yeah, and you're kind of teasing us a bit. I think I can say that. You're teasing us a bit right till the end. Where did you... They've been through a lot. They've been through a lot together. They've been ill. They've been away. She was away for a couple of years. So where did you want to take the relationship in the end? Because it's not quite conclusive, is it?
Well, I think it probably is conclusive at the end of the book, but I think it isn't all the way through. And even Rebecca, I don't think you knew which way quite I was going to jump with it.
No, it was amazing. I was having to wait to the delivery of the manuscript to find out what was going to happen.
Yeah, no, so I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And I think the book before, The Locked Room, had them, it was set during COVID and lockdown, and they had to, like a lot of us, they suddenly had to spend some time together. And I think that suddenly changed how I saw them.
That can be hard, can't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
it can be hard, or it can be sort of, it can change how you feel about things.
Yeah.
And I think it changed how they felt about a lot of things. So yes, but Rebecca and my editor Jane didn't know which way. And I think it was Rebecca who wrote in the margin, you know, oh, you went there. So I'm not going to say where I went, but I went there.
Yeah, and there's, I love the book because if you've read the series, it sort of picks up on a lot of threads that have been left here and there, and you kind of, there's a little hints from the books, from the series. Was that sort of deliberate? You wanted to round it all off?
I'm so glad you noticed those.
Yeah.
Yes, I challenged myself to mention every single other book.
You did.
So I hope it's not, you know, too clunky, but there's a mention of every one of the books that's gone before in there. And there's a character who turns up who is kind of left over from the first books. It's definitely, there's a loose end that I had left untied, which I hope gets tied up in this book. So that was quite satisfying, I have to say.
And I think my favourite, I mean, apart from Ruth, whom I love, but my favourite character is Cathbad, who's just a wonderful, and you never really know where he's going to go, but he's really in touch with his spiritual side. And in this book, he really gets a story. He really gets a great story.
Thank you. I'm so glad you like Cathbad. So Cathbad's a druid character who really was just meant to be another character in the first book. You know, he really was just meant to be one of many, but somehow he sort of took over in some weird druidical way, and you know, he's done lots of, I've tried to kill him twice, but he won't be killed. So there he is. So I think in this book, in some ways, he does come into his own.
And he's even appeared in Harry Nelson's dreams and actually saved him.
Yes.
From a very dark fate.
Harry Nelson doesn't like to admit this, but they do both believe, or Cathbad fully believes that they've got a spiritual connection, and that he has in some ways saved his life in a dream, and Nelson has saved Cathbad's life in a dream. So Cathbad definitely believes that. Nelson is not so sure, but probably secretly does believe it, I think.
Yeah, and there's also a sort of, he calls Kate, Ruth's daughter, he calls her...
Well, Hecate or Hecate, yes.
So he also, there's a sort of certain connection between the two, and he's been a really important person in her life.
He has, he really has, and it's a bit of a thing with Ruth's daughter Kate that everyone calls her something different, and to Ruth's intense annoyance, Nelson always calls her Katie, and Cathbad calls her Hecate, which is equally annoying to Ruth, really. But yes, he's a sort of, I think he has made himself a kind of spiritual guardian to them. And the only person who is a bit skeptical about this is Ruth's cat, Flint. And I don't know if any of you read the short story about Flint. And Flint is from Flint's point of view. It's in my short story collection. And Flint really doesn't like Nelson, I have to say, really doesn't like Nelson. Did like Frank, doesn't like Nelson. Obviously, he loves Kate, but he's very suspicious of Cathbad because Cathbad can speak cat.
Ah, right.
And he thinks that's very suspicious.
Yeah, it is. It's hugely suspicious.
It is suspicious.
I'm just going to bring in you, Rebecca. Just can you take us back to when you met Elly Domenica for the first time? Did you know it was going to be the beginning of this?
I have to say I'm the luckiest literary agent in the world, because I wasn't always a literary agent. I actually, like Elly, we both started our working lives as editors in publishing houses, and I was an editor. And then in 2012, I decided that I wanted to be more at the beginning of the process of a writer's life. And I don't know how much you know about literary agents, but we are the people who find talent and find writers and then sell their books to the publisher and then look after the process of publishing that book. And so I joined a literary agency called Janklow and Nesbitt. I had no clients. I think Janklow and Nesbitt were when I look back, they were amazing to give me a job, because I came and I said, I represent no authors, please pay me a salary. And then I had to find lots of authors. And you were already with the agency, but your your agent left while I was there, and someone said, would you, since you have very few clients, would you like to look after Elly Griffiths? And I was trying to remember, I mean, I think you'd only written maybe 4 books.
I think maybe, yes. It was about, that was quite early on, because I remember you came with me when we did a launch event in a castle in Norwich, and that was quite early on.
That was very, and I sort of, but for me actually it was kind of amazing because I was brought up in Cambridge, which is very near North Norfolk, and my grandmother had a cottage in North Norfolk, and so all my childhood had been going to this part of the world, and so I immediately connected with this landscape. I completely understood it, and I loved the books from the first moment. So yeah, it was very, and then I've just seen, so I immediately fell in love with them, and I think it was a moment in Britain and America actually where you were growing an audience of people who'd read 4 books and just were desperate to know what happened next, and were completely absorbed by the character, by the relationship with Nelson, by the group of people and the landscape. I think those things just came together.
It was lovely to see that, wasn't it, happening?
So I've just watched this series find readers now around the world, and here it's incredible to see.
And Denmark is quite interesting because I was watching your first interview ever at Krimimessen, which I think it was in 2018.
Yes,
and you were writing book number 10, but number 1 had just come out, and I can reveal you weren't in this big space, you were in a smaller space, and just to think now, so you have brought out 2-3 books a year for a number of years to get to 15 quickly.
It's been wonderful, really. So I've been every year since then. You couldn't keep me away, apart from when COVID happened and everyone was kept away. So I have to say, and so my publisher, Guds Forlag, who are wonderful, they acquired my books when I'd written quite a few of them, but they brought them out very quickly in Denmark. And now Denmark is my best audience, really, after the UK, and I suppose America in terms of numbers, but really then it's here. And so actually,
proportionally,
but yes, proportionally. And in fact, you got it's good. It's poor. You got that slightly earlier than the UK, so we actually brought it out here a little earlier. So really, it's almost like my first audience, really. So yes, it's been so lovely. It's so lovely that people have taken Ruth, I think, particularly to their hearts. You know,
and what do you think? Do you think it's because Norfolk resembles part of the west coast of Denmark, and because of the Viking history and so on? What is it about Ruth and Denmark? Because clearly we love it.
I think there is a little bit of that. I think it is a similar landscape, and of course only 9,000 years ago, so you can tell I'm married to an archaeologist, that's yesterday, only 9,000 years ago Britain was attached to Scandinavia, and Norfolk would have been attached, you know, so it is the same landscape, really. There's a very shallow sea between us. There's a very similar mythology, I think, and a sort of sense which I think you get in Denmark of living with the landscape and part of the landscape. I was just talking to my friend Neil Lancaster, I don't know if any of you have come across him, British writer who's starting a series in Danish, and he's from the very north of Scotland, though he doesn't actually have a Scottish accent, but he's from there, and he said that he was really taken with how similar Danish is to the Scottish, the Gaelic spoken up there, because it's all Viking. You know, they're all Vikings, really. So, but I also think it's Ruth, being a strong, independent woman, has really struck a bell with strong, independent women in Denmark.
Yeah, and there weren't that many forensic archaeologists around at the time when you started.
No, well,
it was
Jensen
really something new.
Yeah,
but she's not an archaeologist.
But she's a strong woman.
She's a strong woman.
Yes.
Yeah, but that was something completely new. And of course, archaeologists are brought in when there's a new building site and they find some bones, and they need to find out if it's important or whether they can build the multi-story car park on top of it.
Yes, so they are called in when there are buried bones, and they can tell how or why they were buried. And my husband Andy was a lawyer when we met him. He had a proper job. But when we were married, because I remember meeting him, and he was with a lot of other lawyers, and they're all in their pinstripe suits, you know, and they were a bit corporate. And he said to me, "Oh, you know, I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be an archaeologist." And I thought, "Oh, that's so sweet." So we got married, and then when we had young children, he said, oh, do you remember that thing about being an archaeologist? Well, I'm going to do it now. And it seemed a lot less sweet, I can tell you. But it was the inspiration for the Ruth books, you know, and the idea that an archaeologist would be called in as an expert witness for the police, which does happen.
And one thing I've noticed is that, and maybe you can talk a bit about that, but Ruth really hasn't changed. She's still Ruth. A load of things have happened to her, but she's been a really steady character. I was just wondering, as the series kind of went on and you got more and more popular, did you change something because of the feedback you got about her? Do you think you were influenced? And then maybe we can talk about whether you influenced the direction of the series.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's an interesting question. I'd be interested to know what Rebecca thinks. I think she's changed a little bit because she's been changed by life, and by motherhood has changed her quite a bit, I think. And just by getting older. And that's, I suppose, that comes down to the decision to make this the last book for now, is that I early on made the decision for her to age in real time. And you don't have to do that in books. No. You know, I think Lee Child, I don't think Jack Reacher ages at all. And I don't think he's ever going to age. I think that's a decision that Lee made really, really early on. But I made a decision she would age, and so would Nelson. So, of course, she's 15 years older, so she is different, and she has a child. But I don't think that she's changed much in other ways. What do you think, Rebecca?
Well, it's really interesting, actually. To prepare for this, I went back and I read the first book, The Crossing Places, and it was really, because I hadn't read it, you know, for a really long time, and it was really striking to see Ruth's sort of as an not a mother, actually, and also, you know, and all that pressure on a woman coming in her 40s to not have her child. And so I think, in a way, she has changed. She's become much more confident in herself, in a way. I think that first book was brilliant at describing that fearful state of being a single woman in your 40s, unmarried, without a child, and sort of the work-life balance and having prioritized your work. But
Harry also, Nelson builds her up because he says she's the leading, you know, expert. He often refers to her that way.
I think Nelson has his faults, and certainly he does have his faults, but I think he is always respectful to women. He is raised by a very strong mother, and he has got 2 older sisters. So he really respects strong, intelligent women. So he does, but did he build her up? Well, he builds her up in that way, but maybe he brings her down in other ways. I don't know. But I think the book in which you can see the influence of Denmark is Bleeding Heart Yard, which is a Harbinder Kaur book, in which Harbinder, the main character, gets a Danish girlfriend called Mette. Which is based on the beautiful, lovely Metas I've met here. So,
amazing.
But just to sort of add another, I mean, as a sort of agent reading Elly's work through time, we had lots of conversations about, in a way, your fear of being sort of true to Ruth and true to Nelson, because if you're trying to keep the series going too long artificially, you start putting them into situations that might not be quite right. And that was, in a way, your concern about when you would finish the series, because you didn't want to start being untrue to the characters, I suppose.
I think that really is true, and I think that was one of the big decisions, which we talked about as well, was, you know, when you have a will they, won't they story, I think you do have to say in the end whether they do or they don't, because otherwise it's just, you know, it is just frustrating and it becomes artificial. So whether you've read it or not, the book 15, and I won't say which way, but you do know, you do find out that is resolved whether they do or they don't. And so I think that's why that part of her life is kind of finished. But I read The Crossing Places recently, and I was surprised that Nelson used to smoke.
Oh,
did he?
Yes.
Oh, I forgot that.
Who knew? Well, not me. But luckily, he has a cigarette at New Year's Eve. So if anyone asks me that, I'm going to say he gave it up. That was his New Year's resolution. He gave it up. And he's never mentioned it again, or I've never mentioned it again. So I'm afraid that was something I'd forgotten from the first book.
That's bad editing, isn't it? No one noticed
yes,
that.
It was before you came on board, Rebecca.
I wouldn't have let that go.
Rebecca is very, very good at noticing things, and you know, working on this time travel series as well has been very interesting with Rebecca. She keeps saying, "But why did that happen? And I'm
I
like,
have a very logical mind.
which is great.
Which is
And you don't always know
sometimes good
why.
and
I don't always know. I say, I don't know. And Rebecca's, well.
So how, I mean, when you work together, how soon do you send something to Rebecca and say, what do you think? So with the Frozen People, for instance.
With the Frozen People was a bit different, because normally with the Ruth books, I'd wait until I'd finished the manuscript. So Rebecca and Jane, my editor, would see that the finished thing. But with the Crossing Places, I did send it to you, didn't I, at early stages.
Frozen People, not
with the Frozen Places, yeah. With the Frozen People, I did send it to you at early stages, and you saw, and but we actually had, we arrived in Horsens a little earlier than the festival, so we had like an afternoon here, and we walked around the grounds of our hotel, which has some lovely lakes and things, and we were talking about the plot of the next book, and that's kind of nice to work that way, isn't it, quite early on?
Yeah, that's an unusual, I mean, in a way, because I came in 4 books into a series, I suppose it was a different relationship with the Ruth books in that certain things were established, and it's been fun to sort of start this one, but also to have, for you to, I mean, it was like a big, I think maybe sometimes readers don't know the sort of fear of authors, like the risk of starting something new, and will my readers like it? And, you know, and in a way, I suppose my job is to be there to give a writer confidence, and
well, you
kind of read the early part.
You definitely do that, and it does give you confidence to have sent it to someone who's, you know, whose taste and opinion you trust so much, and they say, no, it's good, it honestly is good. But actually, we had a moment when we thought of you, Heidi, because we were walking around this lake talking about crime, and we saw a dead body. No, we didn't, but we
that could have made such a great story.
Yes, I'm sorry. But what we saw was quite spooky. It was an anorak in the water, and it looked like a body. So
just down here.
Yeah. And so we went
very alarming, because we've just been reading Heidi's book, in which, you know, the lake with featured.
And not to give any spoilers for Heidi's book, but which is brilliant. There is a bit where there's a bit of clothing found in the water, and that's quite a moment, isn't it? So we were thinking,
Yes.
You could have. Yeah. So, I mean, when you started with Ruth, so when you start with a new series, you make some choices about the character that then you're stuck with for however many books. So Elly Dawson, how did you work on that character? Did you work together, or did she arrive fully formed? Like, I think Ruth, I think you've said you saw her, she was there.
When I was hearing you talk this morning, I was thinking, because obviously I was really tantalised, I was thinking, what is Elly going to do next? And is it going to work? And is it going to... And you started talking to me quite early, not really so much about the time travel, but about Elly, and just she was kind of forming herself. We had those conversations about her as a person, and that's when I probably knew that it was going to be okay, because if you've got a character that is so strong and that works for you, you can kind of build the stories around.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you. But yes, I think for me it is, and I think for you as a writer too, Heidi, it's the character, isn't it? It's the character that you have to believe in the character, because, you know, to be honest, I am asking you to believe in time travel in this book. So you have to really believe in the character, sort of take you through this, but I think really, to be honest, I've asked you to believe in Ruth, and there aren't that many forensic archaeologists involved in murders, and very few that are involved in a murder every year for 15 years. Yes. So I have asked you to take a bit of a leap with me, with Ruth, so I guess I was taking, you know, the same thing with Elly, and yes, Ruth did appear walking across the marshes in Norfolk. I did sort of see her and know all about her, but Elly took a bit slower to emerge, really, and because I'd always wanted to write about a time-travelling detective. That's all I had. And occasionally I tried it out on Rebecca and I said, time-travelling detective, and she said, oh yes, and then I didn't go any...
not yet.
Yes, next Ruth, but then I didn't get any further with it. But then I hit on the idea of Elly, but actually she has a particularly sort of strange inspiration in my head, which is a medieval poem by Chaucer, which some of you will know, Canterbury Tales, written in the 1300s, and it's about a group of pilgrims going on pilgrimage to Canterbury, and there's a character in it called the Wife of Bath, who is a tremendous character. You know, you'd find her an amazingly modern character today, but you think she's in the 1300s. She married 5 times, very proud of that. Married 5 times. She has a gap between her teeth, and she's called Alison. So those 3 things you can see in Elly Dawson. She's been married 3 times, she has a gap between her teeth, and of course she's called Alison.
Thus Elly is born. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up quite soon, but I mean, time travel, you could go anywhere with that. You could do anything. You've started really a sort of quite limitless universe, whereas with Ruth, there isn't a University of North Norfolk, I think.
Yeah.
No, there's not a University of North Norfolk, yes.
Smaller environment, but with time travel, you could go anywhere, you could do anything.
Yes, and
for years and years to come.
But that's really exciting. But of course, within the, talking of Ruth, I really wish I hadn't said in the first book that she never wore jeans. How annoying. But by the end, she wears jeans, so I just decided that she did. But Ali can go anywhere, and that is exciting. But of course, you have to set yourself rules in the time traveling. So within the rules I've set her, she can go anywhere, and the rules that Rebecca often reminds me about.
Okay. Yeah, the rules. Well, I hope you'll be coming back here for years and years and years to come. So thank you so much, and thank you to you, Rebecca, for sharing some of your secrets of the trade.
See this
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. And read Heidi's book.
Yeah.
Thank you.